Right, shall we start? Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to welcome all of those members of the public and press who've joined us today. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, including this, the Children and Young People Committee. So feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn their phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we'll leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to assemble in the car park. I'd remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed and a recording placed on the council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break, as is practical. So can I please ask for apologies and first of all, for apologies for absence, please.
Apologies received from Councillor Ian Manning, substituted by Councillor David Levine. Councillor Yasmin Detta, substituted by Councillor Lucy Nessinger. Councillor Ross Martin and Kate Pereira, substituted by Helen Bates.
Thank you very much. So welcome to John Young and Helen Bates, who are our co-opted members. So does any member now wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? I see no hands up for that, so I'll take that as no. Let us move to the first item, which is the Children and Young People Committee minutes for the 20th of January. We are asked to approve the minutes of the meeting as an accurate record. Does everyone agree it's an accurate record? Yes, I see no dissent. We'll take that as yes. Thank you. So we'll take that as approval of the minutes. An updated minutes log, action log, was included in the published papers. Are there any questions on the action log? I see no hands. We'll take the minutes action log as noted. So normally we have an item here for public questions and petitions, but we have none today. We have received no public questions or petitions. So we move on to item 4, which is the holiday voucher scheme. This is to identify the amounts that we are going to distribute in the different holidays for the rest of the academic year, and this report will be introduced by Sarah Callaghan.
Good afternoon, everybody. So this report outlines how Cambridgeshire County Council will support children and families following the end of the National Household Support Fund, which previously funded holiday food vouchers for children eligible for free school meals during the holiday periods. So the objective of the members are asked to approve the value of the vouchers based on the non-recurrent funding provided from a combination from the anti-poverty reserves, LGR reserves, and an element of the Crisis Resilience Fund. By way of background, the Council aims to ensure children have the best start in life, including access to nutritious food and financial security. The holiday voucher scheme, funded by the Household Support Fund, provided vouchers during school holidays. The government has withdrawn the voucher scheme, meaning that it cannot continue in its current form. To manage the transition, the Council has confirmed that 1.3 million can be allocated from the Anti-Poverty Reserve to increase the total funding to 2.7 million, alongside 1 million from LGR reserves and 350,000 from the Crisis Resilience Fund. Figures were calculated on a take-up of 90%, so the vouchers were proposing at a value of £10 for each of those holiday periods, and figures were calculated on a take-up of 90%, which assumed a baseline of 21,500 vouchers to be claimed. This was then uplifted to reflect expected increases in eligibility from the start of the new financial year, and also allows a contingency in case there is increased take-up. If the contingency is unspent, it will go back to the anti-poverty reserve as per the approach outlined within the report. The Department for Work and Pensions have confirmed that the Crisis and Resilience Fund can support the Easter 2026 vouchers, and we have this confirmed by the DWP. So some of the main issues to consider are, in preparation for the end of the Household Support Grant and launch of the new Crisis and Resilience Fund, Cambridgeshire's County Council's anti-poverty strategic lead is currently working with the Poverty Commission Delivery Group, with representation from all of the district councils, health, police, fire and the combined authority and the third sector, to ensure families and households across Cambridgeshire can still access support in moments of need or crisis. A new local assistance scheme will be procured in the summer to ensure anyone in financial shock, which is the phrase used within the Crisis Resilience Fund, can access support within a 48-hour period. The Crisis Resilience Fund will be progressed within this anti-poverty group, which is already established. So the purpose of the report today is to agree the proposed voucher values that are set out in a table within the report. So for the Easter period, 30th of March to 10th of April, we're proposing a weekly value of £10. So the total voucher value is £20. Same value, £10 during May half term, which is just a week, and then from summer, from the 21st of July to the 1st of September, over the 6 weeks, another £10 a week, amounting to £60. So families will benefit from a further £90 over those three combined holiday periods. Committee is asked to approve the proposed voucher values for each holiday period to support families during the transition from the Household Support Fund to the new Crisis and Resilience Fund arrangements, which are to be discussed and explored further during this transitionary period through the established anti-poverty group. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Dunry-Holman and then Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, I'm just hoping that you can confirm my understanding with regard to the 350,000 from the Crisis and Resilience Fund. So I understand that this has been allowed as an exception to the general policies or general guidance for the CRF, thanks to excellent negotiation from our officers in the Cosmic Service area, and due to the fact that technically the Easter holiday starts in this financial year, which has allowed the DWP to give us a bit of wiggle room. Could you just confirm what the DWP, what their guidance has been for us with regard to using CRF money for these vouchers, these blanket vouchers? Thank you.
Yes, you're absolutely correct that we have had confirmation from our contact within the DWP to confirm that we can spend during the Easter holiday period, we can utilise the funds from the Crisis Resilience Fund. And it says authorities have the discretion to design their own schemes within the Crisis and Resilience Fund's guidance, which can include supporting free school meal eligible families during holidays through crisis periods. This may not be through the blanket provision of vouchers to those on free school meals, as we recognise that some free school meal eligible families may not routinely need crisis support. And I think that's the critical bit, that the Crisis Resilience Fund has a much narrower objective in terms of what it defines as those families in need of support. But as you correctly identified, we've had that confirmation that for the Easter period, we can have that, we can support it, so that we've got that time period from now until the end of summer to work up exactly what the ongoing support will be to those families.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Sarah. So I read through the document, and most of it is very good. I'm a bit perturbed by 4 and 4.1, in as much as we haven't really done any alternative options. We've said we have, but we haven't. The alternative option to do nothing doesn't really count in my world. I would have thought we'd have had alternative options of, if it was 8, we could have stretched to half term in October, or if it was £8, that is, or there would have been some analysis work in there. Has anything been done on that, or was £10 always? Is it literally a mathematical sum that we've got X to spend over Y and divide it by the number that equals 10?
It is the second. Yeah, so we've literally, but the reason that is because the criteria currently is free school meal eligibility, and the way that it's processed is through our schools. So although those 24,000 eligible children may have other areas of need, we wouldn't have that detail. So at this moment, by having that transitional period, we'll be able to undertake further analysis to see where those children who are eligible for free school meals may have other risk factors that mean that they're a fit for the Crisis Resilience Fund.
Forgive me following my line of thought a little bit further. Had this been slightly lower, could we have done something in October, or is October a start again and we're going to have to rethink this middle to tail end of the summer?
I think the key thing there in terms of October is that in September, you know, the eligibility for free school meals is extended to all primary age children. So in terms of how far that funding would then stretched, it would be quite compromised. So we've worked from till the end of the summer term based on the fact that the eligibility is as it is, and we've used the funding to do as much as we possibly can to support those families within that period, whilst in parallel we work up what other support we can do through the anti-poverty group.
Thank you. Councillor Goodliffe.
Thank you. I had to request the Equalities Impact Assessment for this item because it hasn't been published. I'd like to request that it is published with the papers that go forward, or the minutes. The impact assessment clearly says that there will be an impact in removing these vouchers on children in poverty. And I don't feel that, as Councillor Goldsack mentioned, that we've really looked at that impact or any other options clearly and thoroughly. I'd prefer to have seen some consultation. We do have some great data on how much of an impact these vouchers have had in the past, and we haven't consulted with any of our service users as to the impact of the withdrawal. With regards to the DWP guidance, obviously, I have a very different opinion as to whether or not we could use the Crisis and Resilience Fund for this. And I'm aware that both the Director for CYP, but also the Chair, has been given sight of a letter which I was given through local MP from the DWP, in fact from Sir Stephen Timms, who is Minister of State at the DWP, which does state that the Crisis and Resilience Fund could be used to carry on funding these vouchers. So I would ask again, ahead of a motion coming to full council next week, that we look again at the full provision of this vital fund because of the impact on poverty, on life chances for children in this county.
Yeah, so just a sort of comment on that. As I responded to you, Councillor Goodliffe, we have to look at the official guidance. The official guidance is absolutely crystal clear. And the letter that you sent to me was, the person from the DWP was anonymous, so it wasn't clear who it was from, and it's not something that we can take notice of when we are administering government money. But that will all come out. But you've made a request that the equalities impact assessment be published. I'm very happy for that to be published, and I hope that will be in due course. Thank you. The next person is Councillor Edge.
Sorry, typing and thinking at the same time. Thank you so much for everything you've done on this. Obviously, I think we're all aware it's a transition piece. I just want to come at it from a slightly different angle, in the sense that, you know, this is about the families that, because it's a transition piece, the families that have been that may feel the impact as a result. The paper kind of outlines that they have been contacted by the council already. Could you just kindly set out what the plan is in terms of communicating to these families in the future, to kind of help them understand where we're going with this?
Yeah, we thought it was very important to alert families in advance to the fact that the national funding was coming to an end. So when we sent the previous vouchers in the last holiday period out, we made clear that the national funding was coming to an end at the end of the financial year, and that we did within that letter make reference to our commitment to continue to support families, but also made explicitly clear that although there was a new fund, the Crisis Resilience Fund, it had a different criteria. And so we have alerted families to the fact that it won't be sustained at the same level. We haven't had any feedback from families to say that they're anxious about this. We've not had anything that's come through directly to the service. We have a letter poised to go following committee today, after you've made a decision in terms of the value of the vouchers. And obviously what we aim to do is, through that anti-poverty group, which has member representatives from across the different parties, to look at how we continue to sustain support within the criteria of that fund.
Thank you very much. Councillor Netzinger.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something that Councillor Goodliffe said about the letter that came and that was shared with you, Edna, and that I also have had sight of. I think it's really important that when letters from, in this case, ministers, are quoted, they're not quoted only one sentence and not the subsequent sentences. So I thought, if it's all right with you, Chair, I might read out what the whole of that section says. So Councillor Goodliffe quoted the first line, which says, the Crisis and Resilience Fund supporting families during the school holidays. The lines in the guidance suggest how the funding should be spent. The Crisis and Resilience Fund guidance does not prohibit the use of vouchers to support families with children eligible for free school meals. It is up to the local authority discretion how to support this group. That is the sentence that Bryony quoted. It then carries on. Authorities are, however, expected not to follow the same approach as the Household Support Fund. This is because, in line with CRF guidance, a decision to provide voucher support to free school meals eligible families must include some form of assessment to understand relative need, underlying barriers, and how best to address these. It must include wraparound support for a referral to resilience services. It must consider a cash-first approach with reasons why a deviation plan to voucher support has been chosen, and it must allow for sufficient investment in application-based crisis payment scheme and resilience services. And resilience services should consider how best to support the poorest and most in need households in doing so. So that letter that was received is extremely clear that we cannot use the Crisis and Resilience Fund for the same type of blanket support that we have used the Household Support Fund. And given that that letter was being quoted, I thought it was really important that it was quoted, the whole context was quoted and understood, because there is a great deal of misinformation out there on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. Councillor Tong.
Apologies, I am not asking a question. It seemed we'd kind of moved on to a bit of a debate about the subject. Is it okay if I launch more into my thoughts rather than have a question?
Strictly speaking, we are asking questions of the officer at this point, and then we can have a debate.
Cool,
But
that's fine.
But the decision before us today is about the amount of vouchers, not sort of vouchers in general, how to help people who are in need. It's really quite a focused decision. Obviously, if it's relevant to that, please go ahead. But do ask questions of the officers at the moment.
I'm okay leaving it. It just seemed we'd kind of spiraled out into a bit of a broader discussion. So I'm okay waiting a minute. And if you want to finish questions, then I can speak.
Any other questions? It seems now is debate. Councillor Tong.
Hello. Well, I wanted to keep things quite simple and just say that I think this is a really good thing that we're doing. The holiday voucher scheme is so important to so many people. It is a lifeline for struggling families. And I wasn't hoping or planning to really discuss the DWP guidance or the ongoing debate about how the Crisis Resilience Fund could be used. I know there's going to be a large debate about that at an upcoming meeting. So I really did want to limit my comments to the fact that I think this is a great thing we're doing. And I think it's quite prudent that we are trying to provide some sort of bridge in the absence of clarity. But since the topic's come up, I will leave one comment. However, I'm not going to give my own views on the guidance itself. But I do want to say, I think at the very least, we should be able to admit as councillors that if there's this much disagreement about what the guidance even says, it's probably just not very good guidance. It's led to a huge amount of misunderstanding. And frankly, I think that's kind of on national government for providing such flawed guidance to begin with. We shouldn't have to be arguing about what the guidance is and what the guidance says. We should be able to read the guidance, read it clearly, and act on that in a strategic way.
Thank you very much. I believe many of us have read it and found it to be extremely clear. I would just say that there's no dispute, no dissent from it within officers or I would say most people who read the guidance. It's extremely clear. Are there any points of debate? Councillor Demery-Holman.
Thank you, Chair. You know, and obviously I raised this when we were discussing the budget. I'm really pleased that we've found some funding to ensure that families don't face a cliff edge. Whilst the voucher is being reduced, I think this will still make an impact on families. And, you know, I think this bridge to September is very important. We are going to help families navigate the difficult summer, you know, that long holiday period. And then there are going to be many changes to eligibility. And I think, you know, I don't really want to go into discussion of the CRF today because it's not relevant to the item, but I would really like to invite those from other parties. Both myself and the chair of COSMIC are very keen to have conversations. I think we all want to do the right thing by families, but please come to us, happy to talk. You know, obviously it is important that we discuss things in open forum, but I think we could be a lot more constructive if we try and work together to deliver for our residents rather than just... I will stop my statement there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate the spirit of that. So unless there's any other, Councillor Goodliffe.
Thank you. So my understanding is if we included some form of assessment to understand relative need, included wraparound support for referral to resilience services, considered a cash first approach and allowed sufficient investment in an application-based crisis payment, we could continue a holiday voucher scheme. That's what Councillor Nessinger has already read out. So I'm assuming it's an administration choice not to consider to continue.
I think that this is something that we're going to have to continue in the motion in full council, but the key is a blanket voucher, that is to say eligibility for, say, free school meals automatically without the assessment of wraparound care, without the all the associated work going into family by family. Just automatically, if you get free school meals, you get this voucher. The simplicity of that is the essence of the safety net. That is not available under this scheme. And we will have to look at other ways, as Councillor Demery-Holman said, we'll have to look at other ways, imaginative ways, to really address the need that there is out there, undoubtedly. Unless there's any further comments or debate, I propose that we move to the vote. Co-opted members are allowed to vote on this matter. So anyone who supports this proposal, please raise your hand now. Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you very much. So shall we move now to the next item, education transport contracts, item 5. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. We do need to get confirmation on the numbers.
I can say that it was carried. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 14 for and 1 against.
1 abstain.
Not abstention, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tamar. Sorry about that. So item 5, education transport contracts. Sarah Callahan, this is you again. Thank you. Or Alison.
This one's Alison.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Children and Young People's Committee is recommended to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing the contracts for the provision of home to school transport to In Toto Education and the Centre School, starting in May 26 for implementation in September 26 to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People Committee. And secondly, to scrutinise the contracts to be awarded through the DPS which are below the key decision threshold. On an annual basis, the Home to School Transport Service procures a number of routes through the dynamic purchasing system where new routes are required, where there are significant changes or routes are due to be re-procured. For 26-27, the upcoming year, there are approximately 10 mainstream contracts and 98 contracts for pupils with SEND to be procured through the dynamic purchasing system. Within those, there are 2 contracts which meet the key decision threshold and are being brought here to committee for a delegated decision. The remaining contracts, which are below the key decision threshold, are listed in Appendix 2 of the report for scrutiny in order to provide oversight of the contracts that are to be awarded through the DPS. The contract for In Toto Education, the first of those we're seeking delegated authority for, is a contract to provide transport to an alternative provision provider for a significant number of individual routes for children. The second of these contracts is the Centre School Transport Contract, and that is for the provision of a number of transport contracts for children with EHCPs travelling to the Centre School. There are a large number of transport contracts in place for the school, and all of these have been reviewed with the school in order to minimise routes and optimise travel opportunities. That's what we are coming to committee for, to seek delegated authority to go out to tender for all of those routes for the Centre School. In Appendix 2, the list of contracts have been brought to committee so that committee has oversight of those contracts for 2026. You'll note that there is a lower number of contracts this year than we have brought to committee in previous years, and that's due to the extension of existing contracts. As contracts are issued for varying lengths of time and have specified extension opportunities. Extensions are used where we determine that it's the appropriate opportunity, they provide good value for money, and where they work effectively for the individual child. Thank you. That's the end of what I'd like to just run through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Alison? We've got Councillor Edge.
Thank you, Alison. Just a couple of kind of questions, if I may. Firstly, just to kind of, I think, help with our context of understanding here. So the highest individual cost journey is associated with a single route to Cromwell Community College in Chatteris, a cost of £263 a day. For the sake of explanation, can you just help help committee understand why this single route is at a cost almost twice as much as the average of any other in that type? Because I think that would just help us. My second question is obviously we in 2024 we received a report from People2 recommending some improvements to the processes and arrangements run by the transport team. And I guess what I'm just asking for is, in having presented kind of this, do we feel that we have some level of confidence now that that team are responsible for negotiating, managing these contracts, have made a step change, and is this having a material difference to both excessive costs and single passenger contracts? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so to explain by way of context, there are a number of reasons why the cost of routes will vary. And where it is an individual route, it doesn't necessarily mean that it relates to an individual child. It could be a number of pickups on that route, distances, and a range of other factors that would affect the cost of that. So, for example, there's a difference between urban and rural routes. There are differences in price potentially where there are fewer bids. If there are routes that have longer mileage, which increase operator time and fuel cost, and sort of the variation in operator capacity. So if we might be tendering a route and there are spare vehicles at the time of tendering, that might bring the cost down. Whereas if it's a new route, we might be looking to bring in additional and new resources, which would attract higher costs. So there's a lot of factors there about geographic factors, route characteristics, the supplier market conditions, operational pressures on the sector, as well as those individual circumstances of those journeys that need to be covered on that route and the complexity of that route. So there's a lot of factors that would affect the pricing of an individual route. In relation to the other question, in terms of you referenced the work that we've had done in terms of reviewing the service and our sort of process improvements in relation to our service delivery and our procurement. In relation to this particular, in relation to these contracts that we are procuring, we do look to drive efficiencies through this process. We look for opportunities where we can share routes, where we can revise routes, where we can maximise vehicle optimisation. So, for example, we would look at where it might be more cost effective to have a larger vehicle than two smaller vehicles. So there are lots of mechanisms in place now that we are using to sort of review the routes with schools, and we do that in partnership with schools to ensure that we are meeting the needs of individual children and that we are optimising and maximising those routes under a regular review process. There is still more work to do, and we are looking to improve our systems that support us to do that, but it's very much a work in progress and work that we are undertaking.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Demery-Homan and then Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like I'm understanding it better thanks to your presentation, Alison, but just for absolute clarity. So in Appendix 2, are these routes, are they specifically tied to provision of transport for SEND children? Is that
The majority are, yes.
The majority are, okay. But some of these are more general home to school links.
Yeah, they are for children with EHCPs in the main, but sometimes there may be exceptional circumstances that are considered by a panel that may also lead to the procurement of transport.
Okay, thank you. That's useful. And then my other question, and I think this is it's somewhat more broad, but obviously, sorry, paragraph 2.1 highlights that for the statutory provision is for children who live within the boundaries of the local authority. I'm going to speak a little bit about something I've come across in my professional life. I've worked at Bassingbourn Village College is a place that I've worked, and they have significant challenges with getting children to school who live in Hertfordshire. Now, I'm just wondering if you can give us a little bit more detail on how, is there any way that we can support colleges who are on the county boundary, schools that are on the county boundary, that have quite a significant number of students crossing county boundaries to attend their schools? Thank you.
We have to operate within the guidelines and the specific requirements that are set out in our policies. So we would need to take that away and look at that as an individual case. But it's set out clearly in our policy what constitutes the rules that are set out in this report.
And so just to be crystal clear, that is a Cambridgeshire County Council policy rather than a statutory requirement.
Our policies follow national guidance, but I would need to check that particular point.
Thank you. Well, I would perhaps welcome a conversation about that particular instance, and I think more broadly it may be something that we as a committee could look into another day. Thank you.
And apologies, if I could just respond to the earlier point, 10 of those routes are for mainstream schools that are set out in the appendix. So apologies if I wasn't clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you for the report. It's it's well written. It's showing what we want to know. Couple of things. One simple. If I ask a small favour, I have no idea where Bedazzle is or anything like that. Is it possible in these reports that you could put Bedazzle and a note of the town or the village that it's in? Because that brings me on to my second point. I'm sure there is a mountain of work going on in the background that says £6 million spend on one supplier over the next 5 years goes a long way towards building a new school. Where would we build that new school if we could do it, and et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see and understand that in a bit greater depth. This is this is a necessity. We need this. We need to sign this off and get the children to their closest schools, et cetera, et cetera. I know some of these are transferring across the county because of the special needs aspect. You've got children from Sarn going to St Neots. That's a long journey. That's about as far as you can go across county and not exit the county. So it would be really useful at a future meeting of this if we had a presentation on the thought that goes behind these and where the new schools would come and could come and should come based on the information that we're looking at. So a small fillip of information, if you could help us that don't know where Bedazzle or Bain and Dale are, et cetera, that would be quite an easy fix. And the second one's a bit bigger, but maybe we can have that on a future agenda, please.
Yes, absolutely. We can provide the location in the reports. And I think perhaps I'll hand over to Sarah, because I think the second point you raised is work that we are doing when we're considering our SEND sufficiency and our much broader strategy in terms of place provision and transport.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, Councillor Goldsack, you'll be aware that the white paper was published on the 23rd of February. And within that paper, there's a strengthened expectation around the local authority delivering on its sufficiency duties. And so what we're aiming to do is do a SEND sufficiency review that will do exactly what you've set out, because we have been overly reliant on transport whilst we've had the delays to the 2 new special schools. So you'll be aware that we had confirmation from the DFE that I think we referenced in a previous committee where the 2 special schools that were delayed, we had a letter from the DFE just before Christmas asking whether we wanted to proceed as planned, which would create an additional 270 schools, or to alternatively look at delivering that provision locally without opening the 2 free schools. Having looked at that, we've gone back to the DFE to say, yes, we do want to open those 2 free schools. The reason I'm sharing that is because it picks up on the comments that you're making, that if we've got a lack of capacity, then our dependency on home to school transport increases. So what we want to do in that sufficiency statement that I've just referenced is bring to you, this is our demand, this is the current configuration that aims to meet that demand, and these are some of the changes that we're making in order to better reflect it. So that will also bring in scope the enhanced resource provision that we've talked about previously, that is the specialist provision on mainstream school sites. So it's not within this report, but it will be in a future report where we update on that SEND sufficiency and our plans to better meet demand through the reconfiguration of our schools.
That's great. That's exactly the kind of it's a little bit like, and I take this as a compliment, because all the good work that you're doing, we don't see until it comes here on a bit of paper. Even in a committee structure, we see it spokes, we see here, and we want to just be able to put input into that. More than perhaps we have done to date. So I wish you luck with that, and hopefully we'll see it spring, early summer this year. That's a question.
I have to check the forward plan, but it's definitely on there. So we can confirm that after the meeting, Councillor Goldsack.
Yeah, I think we definitely consider that a request from the committee that it must go ahead in June. Thank you, because we do need to get more sight of the background work that's going on, because it's a very important area for all sorts of reasons. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Councillor Netzinger.
Thank you. It's possible that what I was going to ask for has already just been covered, but what I was going to say follows on from what Johnny was saying about the need to make sure that we are reviewing our home to school transport offer and the way in which we procure contracts in a much more holistic way. Rather than not always. I mean, I'm sure the work with schools is excellent, but we also need to be looking across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, working with the combined authority, looking at what is being done in other councils and the work from the people that was done. I think it would be extremely helpful. I mean, this is a paper about specific contracts, and while there are elements of this that I wish were not the way they are definitely needed for now, because we need to make sure we're getting children to the education that they are being provided with. But I think probably all of us on this committee would recognise that the way in which children are being transported around the county to schools which are a very long way from their homes is not good for the children, and it's not good for their families, and it's not good for the environment, and it's not good for this council. So we need a much broader review of how that's happening. I absolutely take what Sarah's just said about the 2 new schools and the way in which the white paper is changing the way in which SEND will be delivered, but that is going to take really quite a long time, and I don't think we can afford to wait for that process to happen before we have a really serious look at the way in which we do homeschool transport, not only for children with SEND, but for all of our children in mainstream schools as well. So I was wondering whether it would be helpful for the committee to have a briefing note on the work that has been done already on that, so that we can all have an understanding of what is happening, and potentially take a view on whether it's going fast enough and whether we need to do more on it. Is that something that could be provided to the committee?
Absolutely. I was so obviously this paper had a particular objective, but aside from that, absolutely we're looking at reviewing our approach to home to school transport that doesn't just look at it from the perspective of what do we have to do, but also looks at it from the perspective of our corporate ambitions, not just to enable all children to thrive, but also to look at being carbon neutral, to look at and supporting young people to be independent, because obviously that's going to improve their life chances. Looking at how we can increase personal budgets, as well as all the things Alison's outlined in terms of contractual review. So we wanted that paper to be ambitious in its objectives, and not just looking at it from the lens of children, education and families, but also working, as you've said, with the CVCA, and also more broadly across the council with place and sustainability, for instance. So we have started that work. We've been working closely with Chair and Vice Chair to ensure that we do thoroughly capture the ambition in terms of how we want to improve outcomes for children and young people, not by just delivering on the statutory duties around home to school transport, but also to improve their outcomes by supporting them to develop the skills for independent living, but also to support those objectives, as I've said, around carbon neutral. So yes, the ambition of the plan is broad in scope, and we've had a very clear steer about that.
Thank you. Taking the point, though, I wonder if members would welcome a briefing note on this, on the work so far. It would be good if it could appear on the agenda as well, the calendar. We'll take that away and we'll look at it, but if that's the clear view of the committee, then we'll certainly do it. Thank you. Any other comments, points of debate? Are we ready to vote on this matter? Thank you. We're asked to scrutinise the contracts. I believe we have done that to our satisfaction, and also to delegate the responsibility for awarding and executing the contracts to the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. Is everyone content to do that? Shall we have a vote? Those in favour? Thank you. I believe that is unanimous.
It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you, committee. So next item is the education construction contracts and grant funding agreements. Sarah and Alison, take it away.
Thank you. The Children and Young People Committee are asked to approve delegating authority for awarding and executing the contracts, extension periods and associated legal documents to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Children and Young People's Committee for the projects that are set out in section 3.1 of this report. And also to approve delegating authority for executing the grant funding agreement to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Children and Young People's Committee for the project set out in section 3.2 of this report. In relation to the first recommendation, the specific construction contracts for which delegated authority is sought are for Newnham Croft Primary School, which is a scheme to re-roof the school and carry out some remedial works. For Meridian Primary School, which is a replacement of external windows, doors and cladding, and for Ainsbury Primary School, which is a scheme to re-roof the school. Delivering these projects supports Cambridgeshire County Council to fulfil our duty as a responsible body to undertake condition-related works to maintain our school estate to ensure that buildings remain in a suitable state of repair. The maintenance projects that are set are based on the 5-yearly condition surveys which we as a council commission. And these surveys rate the condition of each maintained school, and then using these, the project team use those to prioritise the works which are required on an annual basis. The works are funded through the school's condition grant from the Department for Education. In relation to the second recommendation to port funding to the Meridian Multi-Academy Trust, due to increasing catchment demand in Ramsey, it is recommended to port capital contributions to Meridian Academy Trust for a 150-place expansion of Abbey College. Porting funding to Meridian Academy Trust for the delivery of this project enables the Trust to combine funding sources and complete one capital project to improve and expand Abbey College, which will also minimise educational disturbance and increase value for money. The checks for competence to run expansion projects on the Council's behalf, as set out in Appendix 1 of this report, have been completed, and Meridian was successful in meeting the standards required. The committee are therefore asked to approve the 2 recommendations set out in this report.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there questions for the officers? Councillor Goodliffe.
Thank you. I know the Abbey College site has been very complex, and I know that over the last few years there's been a big history of the listed building and what's going on there. Can you set out whether or not this build fulfills all that school needs in terms of usable classrooms and that kind of thing, and clarify the position of the ownership around that area, please?
Yeah, as you say, Councillor Goodliffe, the Abbey site has historically been viewed as very complex, and we know that Meridian Trust completed a lot of due diligence as part of the process. So recently, Abbey College joined the Meridian Trust. And a lot of due diligence was done for that in order to ensure that that was all factored in and planned for. And we know that Meridian Trust had been previously partnering with Abbey College and had worked with them to develop the proposals to bring forward for the development of the site, to take account of that and provide the spaces that are needed whilst working with the complexities of the site and securing the funding that they need to do that. and are able to combine other resources because they receive their own stock condition funding as well. So they're able to maximise the potential of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edge.
Thank you, Alison. It's just a general question, really, just to understand the process that we go through here. So the paper mentions a 5-year, kind of that we're looking at the maintained schools on a 5-year basis through a survey. So I guess just wanting to understand what that process looks like for our schools and how involved they are. You know, do we get feedback from our schools that they're getting enough support in this area? So it'd be really interesting just to find out a bit more on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the Cambridgeshire County Council receives an annual stock condition allocation from the Department for Education for local authority maintained schools. So on a 5-year basis, in order to prioritise how to spend that grant, every 5 years we carry out stock condition surveys that give us a priority order of works required at schools. A large number of those works don't come through to committee because the majority of those are below the key decision threshold. So they will range from a number of different types of projects, which would include heating, for example, and smaller works. With the projects are discussed with head teachers and business managers, and potentially they may bring in governing bodies as well to discuss those, so that we would agree all the works with the school before we proceed. So we sort of use the funding as fairly and effectively as possible against set criteria for works that meet the needs of schools. So it's a program that we do based on stock condition surveys. Obviously, if we had more money, we would increase the list, I think is the answer to the question in terms of is it sufficient, but it's very, very carefully managed to ensure that we are prioritising the most critical works first, and doing it in an appropriate order to support schools.
Thank you very much. Helen Bates.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check in terms of the condition?
Could I ask you please to just speak really into your microphone? Thank you.
Sorry. Can I just ask, in terms of condition reports, you commission your own surveys. You don't just rely on the DfE's condition data collection reports.
Yes, that's correct. We commission the surveys. We go out to tender for that and commission the surveys. So they're local authority commissioned, yeah.
Thank you. Any questions or debate? Thank you. May we please now move to the vote on these two recommendations. They're subtly different, but essentially they delegate authority, in one case to awarding and executing the contracts, and in the other case for executing the grant funding, to the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you.
Again, that's unanimous.
Again,
Thank
unanimous.
you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Then item 7 is the Finance Monitoring Report. Martin Perbrick, over to you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So the forecast for the Children Education and Families non-DSG budgets to the end of January is to forecast an overspend of £11.33 million. Some of the ups and downs within the report, I'm going to put out some highlights. So the vacancy factor continues to forecast an overachievement of £800,000. And there's an additional £650,000 one-off funding identified as part of the business planning process for 25-26 to support delays in delivery of savings, which has now been applied. Following final agreement of the staff pay awards, there is an increased underspend of £300,000, which has been released across SEF. Children in care placements, the external placements forecast overspend has reduced slightly to 8.6 million to reflect the latest commitments and continued backdated joint funding from health for 3 young people. Whilst there continues to be a pressure in our social care staffing budget of £196,000, this is largely due to agency reliance. It's worth noting that our agency social worker percentage has dropped to 9.5% from a high of 38% in January 2024. In education, the ICT service is forecasting an overspend of £450,000 due to an increase in operating costs of around about £200,000 relating to the extension required for the EastNet contract, plus reduced income across a couple of other contract areas. And finally, a revised cumulative DSG target of 62.8 million was brought forward into 25-26. And the current net in-year DSG forecast is 37.05 overspend. There are a number of other areas highlighted in the report which have pressures or underspends, and the table at 5.3, also related to children in care, shows efforts to manage individual unit costs for the different care settings continues to have an impact. You will note that their secure accommodation line shows a dramatic increase, as this was starting from a base of 0. Sadly, we aren't blessed with the company of Martin Wade today, so if there are questions of a particularly technical nature, they may have to have a written response. With that, the recommendation for this paper is that members are asked to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Are there questions? Councillor Goldsack.
We'll try and be gentle, Martin, in the absence of the other Martin. It's just really about understanding. So the gross budget for the fiscal year is 185 million. Is that correct? I apologise. I'm looking on Appendix 2, page 66. It's got the breakdown of the budget. If I just cut the base of my question, I guess if we're looking at figures for the end of January, and they're forecasting an £11.3 million overspend at the end of March, what the hell are we spending money on in February and March that takes up about 1/3 of the budget? That's it. I'm sure it's staring me in the face, but I just couldn't quite see it. Do you want to?
That is exactly the sort of question I'm going to have to refer to Martin Wade for, I'm afraid.
Okay, if you could, because the way I see it is net budget so far as well. The way I read it is that the actual is 107 of a budget of 154. So we've got 50 odd million to spend, and we're forecasting 11 million overspend, but we've only got 2 months left of the year to do it in. It just didn't add up to me, and it's probably my numerical dyslexia looking at it and the state of my mind at this moment in time. So I could do with an answer on it if possible.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. We'll make sure that the response goes to all members.
Thank you.
It is fair. It's not helped by the fact that we have a figure for the whole year budget, but then the actual's only part of the year. So when it's hard to compare, as they say, apples and apples. It's hard to compare like with like.
Well, I think it may be in here, and I may have missed it, but I think if you could also add to it, Martin, perhaps a bit deeper in understanding of why we're £30 million light in income, because that seems a hell of a big number to me.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any other questions? Because I think it would be really helpful to have a follow-up note with detailed responses to questions. Councillor Demery-Holman.
Thank you, Chair. Martin, I'm looking at the top of page 71 here. Now, talking about the rolling out of more enhanced resource bases, I'm very much of the assumption that this is something that we'd already been planning to do, but I was just wondering if you could give I appreciate it's very early with the white paper coming out, sorry, but how, do you have any sort of feeling on how our work with ERBs lines up with the aspirations of the white paper, and are we expecting to almost be somewhat ahead of the curve with what we're doing on the ERB front?
I'm going to ask Sarah to comment on this as well, but certainly I think our overall inclusion for all strategy, we feel it does align quite strongly with the reforms that are in the white paper. We think that it does put us ahead of the game in some areas. Sarah can talk more about that in detail, but
yeah, one of the objectives of the white paper is that every secondary school will have an inclusion unit. So, and the objective of that is within the paper, they're talking about having an approach which is universal, targeted plus and specialist. And the expectation is that there'll be a default for all children to remain in mainstream. So in order for that to happen, there needs to be specialist provision within mainstream schools. So bluntly, yes, the ERB programme directly reflects that national aspiration where you would be able to access specialist provision on a mainstream site so that children get that additional support but can remain in mainstream.
Thank you. That's really useful to know. I'm very pleased to hear that we feel that we are in good stead on this particular front. Just regarding inclusion units, again, so from my experience as an agency worker in schools, I'm yet to come across somewhere that doesn't already have something like that set up. This may be a question that you can't answer, but do you have any awareness of the amount of I'm talking secondary schools here, apologies. Are you aware of any schools within the local authority area at secondary level that don't have that already and will need a lot of support to get in line with whatever the bill comes forth following the white paper?
So firstly, all of our secondary schools are academies, so are obviously directly line managed through their trust arrangements, but they do all have some kind of inclusive approach, which can be very different in different schools. I think what's significant within the white paper is another funding stream that is referenced is a 1.8 billion over the next 3 years for something that they're calling experts at hand. And the objective of that fund, and obviously we're waiting for further detail, is to facilitate access from the relevant services to schools so that they can give that specialist support. So I think it's quite variable currently, but I think the aspiration is that through this new funding stream, there'll be more specialist resource. So some of them might currently just be, allowing children to have to re-regulate and come out of the classroom environment, whereas I think the aspiration is that there's a more standardised approach, and there is reference to inclusion standards also within the white paper to support that.
Thank you. Got Councillor Goodliff, then Councillor Netzinger.
Thank you, Chair. As we've strayed into the white paper, I've read a number of summaries of the white paper, but it would be really useful, I think, for this committee, for the members to have a local summary of what it would look like for our Cambridgeshire children. So it'd be great to add that to a forward plan. I'm looking at page 70, and obviously there is a forecast overspend in SEND services, some of which I'm sure is from locum educational psychologists. Can you give us an idea of the impact next year of not having so many educational psychologists, locum or permanent, and the impact that that will have on the number of EHCPs we're able to issue in time for our children and young people, please?
Well, Sarah to come back.
Yes, so this week we're about to launch our education redesign, and previously in the October committee we had that one-off additional funding of 780. Within the redesign we've got a recurrent 720,000 that we built into that redesign that will enable us to add capacity within our caseworkers and our EPs. So obviously, we haven't formally launched the consultation yet, but one of the objectives is to obviously recognise that our timeliness is impacted by the lack of capacity in some of those teams. So within the redesign, our aim is to increase that capacity.
Thank you. Councillor Netzinger, then Councillor Edge.
Thank you. The first point that I wanted to make was just about the way in which some of this is presented, and it was particularly in relation to the vacancy factor, which if you were just reading this from a purely financial point of view, it might look as if that overachievement feels like a good thing. I don't think that in the context that we have in children's services, an overachievement of the vacancy factor is a good thing. It's not helpful on the whole. I might be wrong about where the vacancies are, but broadly, I think in children's services, what we want is to have a full complement of staff in order to be able to make sure that we are managing our children and families and providing the care that we need to as quickly and in as timely way as possible. So I think that the way it's written makes it look as if that's positive, and I don't think it is. The other thing that I wanted to reflect on very briefly is the vast majority of our overspend in this budget is in children in care placements, which we know is a national problem. It's an enormous national problem. And within the little comment on that, there is also, though, something about the funding from health, that we have succeeded in getting funding from health for 3 young people. I think that's really positive. It's something that's frustrated me enormously for quite a long time, that health seem to think that young people who, to me, sound very, very clearly as if they have quite serious health issues, often mental health issues, but not only mental health issues, are simply dumped by the health service as the responsibility of the council. So I'm really pleased that we've managed to get some health funding for some of our young people, not least because I think it makes health take their needs more seriously if they are also having to be responsible for some of the funding for their care, and they should be taking their needs seriously. So I think my question really, and it's probably for Martin rather than Sarah, is are we going to carry on fighting for health to make more of a contribution for more of our children? Because I think it's right for the children as well as for us that they should do that. Thank you.
Absolutely. We try and make our assessments as strong as possible so that we can share the evidence with health colleagues, which helps them to make a decision. And in the cases that we've reflected in this report, the evidence has been clear and overwhelming. They have adopted a slightly different approach in our panel meetings as well, which has been very helpful. So it's not been so adversarial, and that approach is welcomed from us. I think something to be mindful of is changes to the ICB and the broader footprint of Central East ICB, incorporating a number of local authorities where there is a range of funding from ICB to children in care placements. But locally, we have worked really hard on our relationship with the ICB colleagues that have been part of Cambridge and Peterborough, and we will continue to do that in the same way. We see the real value in what they're doing, not just financially, but actually it means that the children's needs are getting met in a way that is shared between us, as you reflected, and that's probably the most important thing. The money is also extremely helpful and reflects that shared responsibility, so we will not stop.
Thank you. Are there any other points for Martin or Sarah? Thank you. We are asked to note the report. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is education performance. Sarah, would you like to introduce this report? Thank you.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to present the latest educational outcomes for children and young people across the county, and to enable the Children and Young People's Committee to scrutinise attainment achieved at the end of 2025 at each key stage, alongside the actions being taken with schools and partners to secure further improvement. By way of context, on the 23rd of February 2026, the government published its schools white paper, Every Child Achieving and Thriving, which set out a national ambition to ensure that every child can achieve and thrive regardless of their background, needs or circumstances. Whilst most of the public While most of the public attention has focused on the reforms relating to special educational needs and disabilities, the White Paper also sets out clear expectations for the education system to address inequalities in children's experience and outcomes, particularly for those from disadvantaged or more challenging backgrounds. The White Paper proposes to address these challenges through a strengthened focus on inclusion within mainstream education, with particular emphasis on improving school readiness through strong early years provision, identifying and responding to additional needs earlier, strengthening inclusive practice in schools, and narrowing attainment gaps across primary and secondary education. Locally, the Council's agreed framework, Inclusion for All, closely reflects this national direction of travel. The framework sets out a shared ambition across the local education system to enable all children and young people to thrive regardless of their background, with a strong focus on inclusive practice, early intervention, and high expectations for all learners. The council it's helpful to note that the council operates within a mixed school system. All secondary schools in the county are academies, and the majority of primary schools are also academies, with 99 primary academies and 112 maintained schools. Within this context, the local authority works in partnership with schools and multi-academy trusts to influence improvement across the system, recognising that it does not directly manage the majority of schools. The forthcoming Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill is expected to introduce strengthened measures to improve accountability across multi-academy trusts and to establish a statutory register for children not in school. These measures will support stronger oversight across the education system and help ensure that all children are visible within it. Overall, statutory outcomes across the county have remained broadly stable. However, variation in outcomes across districts and between groups of pupils remains and requires continued focus. This report, therefore, provides members with an overview of outcomes at the end of each key stage in 2025 and the actions being taken with schools and partners to improve attainment and reduce inequalities. Taken together, the national reforms and the Council's Inclusion for All framework provides a clear direction of travel for strengthening inclusive practice and improving outcomes so that every child across the county has the opportunity to achieve and thrive. Some key messages. At the end of the early years foundation stage, the good level of development improved to 67.6, reducing the national gap by 0.7 percentage points. Cambridgeshire exceeds national outcomes in 16 of the 17 early learning goals. So there's 17 early learning goals across the early years foundation stage. Self-regulation is the only area below national, which is interesting when you think about some of the challenges that we're talking around special educational needs. Fenland shows strong improvement, but still lags behind national and Cambridgeshire as a whole. The priorities identified in early years, and we can obviously, through Best Start in Life, we have an opportunity to progress this at pace, is to improve our writing outcomes, strengthen knowledge of self-regulation, support home learning through cross-service work, strengthen locality networks across our private, voluntary and independent settings, health and community partners, and improve accuracy and consistency of early years assessments. At the end of year one, our phonics remains stable at 79.2, narrowing the gap with national due to a smaller decline in national. District variation is significant, with a notable drop in Fenland despite prior investment. So you'll recall we had the Opportunities Fund in Fenland, and that did contribute to a real positive improvement, which does illustrate that when we have targeted approaches, we do make a difference. 9 schools have been identified for targeted support, plus training and access to the English Hub resources. At key stage 2, at the end of primary, Our combined reading, writing, maths shows an improvement to 58.9%, up from 57%, but still notably behind national at 62.7%. And it's there are expectations within the white paper that are referred to earlier that key stage 2 does improve to 65% nationally. Fenland remains the lowest performing district at 51.2%. By subject, reading works stable and just below national at 74.7%. In maths, we've seen a slight improvement at 72.3%, but writing at 68.1% is our weakest subject and is below national. The actions underway to address this is a new writing scheme of work shared with our schools. Training and moderation guidance has been strengthened, and we have some targeted projects to learn from our high-performing schools and to build capacity across all of our schools. We also have some targeted interventions, including the Great Talking Project and integration with the maths hubs. And those projects are targeted towards those districts where we're seeing that the improvement is not as positive. Coming to our GCSE outcomes, the attainment 8 remains stable at 48 and is above national, that is 46.2. Although significant variation continues, with Cambridge and South Cambs performing highly, with Fenland remaining substantially below average. We're undertaking further analysis to focus on subject level patterns and priority pupil groups, and we will be able to share, when we have the validated data for those particular cohorts, more granular detail on this. In terms of A-levels, our national data set is due in March 2026, but our early indications suggest an increase in top grades and pass rates E and above remain unchanged. And again, we'll have more detailed analysis to follow when we have the complete data. And just to come to the focus in terms of our previous discussion, but also in context of the white paper, our attendance tends to be a really good indicator in terms of outcomes for our most vulnerable children, because it is a protective factor. So if children are in school, obviously more frequently, they're likely to do better. So our aspiration has to be to improve attendance and also keep those children in school and reduce exclusions. So the Cambridgeshire absence rate currently is 6.53%, which is broadly in line with national, which is 6.63. And as I've said, attendance is a key indicator of unmet need, and declining attendance often signals other vulnerability. So one of the objectives that we have within the education redesign that I referred to earlier is to develop locality inclusion partnerships, which will coordinate early multi-agency support for children at risk of disengaging with their education. I also wanted to just draw your attention to children who are electively home educated, because obviously in our aspiration to enable all children to thrive, it is for parents to determine whether they want to electively home educate, and it can be the right support for some children. But we also have to be mindful where there are other risk indicators that we have oversight of those children. Currently, we have around 2,200 children recorded as electively home educated, and the Council is strengthening the understanding of this cohort to identify risk and support, and to support reintegration where appropriate. In terms of the national policy direction, the anticipated schools and wellbeing white paper is likely to require local authority register of children not on school rolls and enhanced oversight and safeguarding expectations. So I'm mentioning that in context of that growing number of elective home educated children. So I'll pause there to take questions or points of clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, this is an item which is for our information, as no vote is required, but it is also for us to scrutinise this report, please. So very grateful for questions, comments. I've got Councillor Edge.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to thank you so much for that introduction as well. Really thorough, and really good to hear so much of it. I think it's really clear that you know, the long-awaited white paper is going to have an impact on many things, kind of moving forward, and we'll kind of obviously see how that plays out through the consultation and moving on. I think one of the things that's very much on my mind with all of this, and it kind of plays in, I guess, to this performance report. The emphasis still in terms of performance is so much linked to attainment, and attainment is really important. But there's so many other parts of kind of the total education of our young people that is beyond attainment. And I think what I mean, if there's anything going on at the moment that you're able to share, but I think it would be really good to kind of be looking kind of moving forward about how we're kind of looking at measures on well-being, how we're looking at measures on the kind of the complete journey that our children are going on. I don't think from some of the forums that I've been in around the white paper that we're likely to ever get rid of you know, all of the kind of various tables that kind of come out around attainment, but I think we need to start looking at something differently there to change the narrative, both to understand, you know, how our children are progressing, but actually also to support our schools so that they're able to engage with you know, kind of this kind of idea of inclusion moving forward, which obviously I fully support. So it sounds like me making more of a personal opinion than anything, but I just wonder if there's any views that you've got on that that kind of link to that. But I think it really is a request in the future that we're looking at kind of wider measures in terms of performance.
Yeah, I think it's a point very well made, and I think that's why I wanted to present this report in context of inclusion for all, because you're absolutely correct that attainment is the end result, but we have to look at what are we doing collaboratively across, and it has to be a partnership approach to support that attainment. And for some of our children, obviously, if they have things going on at home, then their GCSEs are not at the forefront of their mind. So to give you an example of how we are thinking about that, within Inclusion for All, one of the areas of the 6 areas of focus is inclusive services. And obviously we have our ambition as a council to be trauma informed. And what we want to create across our schools is settings is that sense of belonging. So we have a number of schools that are engaged in therapeutic thinking, that are using trauma-informed practice, so that they can create that environment where children feel that sense of belonging, so that they're in that place where they're able to learn. So I think this report has a focus on the end of key stage outcomes, but obviously aside to that, there is a lot going on that then creates the right environment for children to thrive. So definitely we could look at producing something when we've got that further analysis by cohort, and I think Claire's report on the virtual school will really lend itself to this. But when we've broken down the data by free school meals, by children on SEND support, by EHCP, by children in need, and children on child protection, we'll be able to have that better granular understanding of which children are not thriving and how are we then targeting our support in response to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got quite a few people to ask questions now. I've got Councillor Demery-Holman, then John Young.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sarah. Again, echo Johnny's comments, a very comprehensive overview, very useful. I've got a couple of questions. I'll probably take them one at a time. 3.14 refers to Year 11 Attainment 8. Now, obviously, Attainment 8 is a very important measure, but I would be very interested to know, are we able to break attainment down to just maths and English language. You know, from my experience when I work with children who struggle in school, you know, for some, hitting good success across attainment 8 might be difficult, but getting that maths and English language GCSE is arguably the most important thing because it's such a barrier to jobs. I'll just pose that question for the minute.
Yes, and we do have that, and actually we've seen improvement across English and maths. So we can share that following this report. I don't have the data to hand right now, but I'll make sure it's circulated.
Yeah, I'd certainly welcome that. Thank you. And then, I mean, looking at the same table again, I think, you know, it's really concerning to see how far behind Fenland is compared to the rest of the county. I appreciate that you referenced some improvements generally in for students in Fenland. When you talk about multi-agency working, how much is the Education Department engaging with the County Council's youth work services? Because for me, one of the key things that we can do to help children who are struggling in school, particularly in deprived areas, is actually give them opportunities outside of school, give them a more well-rounded life that is then just going to boost their general well-being. I mean, Councillor Edge's points are very useful on the well-being front. I think it's really important. So yeah, I'd just be interested to know, have we got that collaboration going on between the departments?
Yes, we do. We do have a collaboration, and there are obviously, as you've said, that there's, you know, by engaging children in different ways, it can help them have a more positive relationship with school. So across a number of different partners and services, and I guess that's what I'm trying to articulate as well in terms of the redesign around the locality partnerships. It is about bringing in the wider community, not just in terms of council services, but also the capacity that exists across communities from the third sector also, to see how we can better. I mean, obviously from a secondary school's perspectives, this is all of our schools are academies, and this is often led by the schools themselves. But the more that we can facilitate access to support and unlock the potential within those communities is vital to improving outcomes. And I think that's why we feel that that place-based approach is really critical, because obviously the experience from district to district is quite different. And also the capacity, the assets within those communities can be quite different.
Thank you very much. John Young.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two questions that I made. The first question relates to Key Stage 2 outcomes, so table paragraph 3.8. And for each of reading, writing and maths, the local authority outcomes are slightly below national, but there is a real gap in the writing. And I just wondered if you had any insights as to why writing in particular was an issue in the local authority area, not just this year, but also last year, where the other two, reading and maths, are much closer to national.
Yes, so there's various reasons, and we are starting to obviously do further analysis on which schools are more impacted. So obviously there's variability across the county, with some schools performing well and others, you know, obviously because they're lower, dragging down the overall outcomes. So we're doing further analysis school by school, and then we're looking to link schools where there is good practice to support other schools. We're engaged in a number of projects, including, as a reference, the Great Talking project, because of that direct link between the ability to communicate and also then to be able to express that, you know, in terms of writing skills as well. So I think it's about unpicking where the good performance is and sharing what is happening in those schools with schools that are struggling. And that is what we're doing through our school improvement service. So they're looking at the outcomes by individual schools so that we can link schools to learn, particularly where they might have very similar cohorts, very similar intakes, but have very different outcomes, so that they can learn from what's working to have better outcomes in individual schools.
Thank you. That's really good to hear, and very much in the spirit of the white papers commitment to working in partnership with all of the stakeholders to further the interests of our children. My second question was really related to that, which is you talked about the patchwork, if you like, of different school governance arrangements, and you're working in an environment in which there are lots of academy schools as well. Have you done analysis on how the academic outcomes compare between the academy sector and the locally maintained sector, and what can we learn from that? Because it may well be that in some respects, you know, there's really great practice going on in academies, and in other respects there's great practice going on in the locally maintained sector, and how can we work together to get the best for all? Thank you.
That's a really good question, because I did ask that question directly myself. And what we've done is we've broken down the different status of schools by district. So interestingly, so if we look at Fenland from a primary perspective, we have 31 primary schools, 9 are local authority maintained primary schools, 22 are academies. So there's something to unpick there, isn't there? So there could be an assumption, just looking at it blatantly, that there's poorer performance where schools are in an academy. But obviously we also have to consider that some of these schools will have been forced conversions where they were underperforming, although we haven't had a lot of academy conversions more recently. So there's definitely something to unpack, and that is part of our analysis.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Netzinger, Councillor Goldsack, and Councillor Stewart after that. Yes, you are.
Thank you. It's a very important report. There are some things in it. I mean, sadly, I've been looking at reports like this for about 17 years now, and some of the patterns in them are the same consistently over all that time, and they are very, very difficult to shift. There are some interesting other things in this, and part of that is some of the things we are testing have changed over those 17 years. So one of the things I found really interesting in the report was the that actually when you look at the data on how children come into reception, those coming in with a good level of development, the differences across the county are tiny at that point. And in fact, the difference between Fenland and South Cambs coming into reception is only 0.3%. I think that's a really interesting thing for us to be paying attention to. And it consistently widens all the way across the education of those children, with in some ways the biggest jump being between them coming into reception. Well, I don't know, actually. I mean, by the time they do their phonics check, which is really only a year and a half later or a year later, they're at 3.8% behind. That's quite a big gap to have happened so quickly, given that they came in with a relatively level, equivalent level. And then by the end of KCH2, they're 9% behind the Fenland results and 15.5% by GCSE. So I think that being aware and making sure that our Fenland schools and parents are aware that actually their children come in just as able as children everywhere else, that the parents are doing a great job up until then, and our nurseries are doing a great job in Fenland. It's what happens after that that's and it's a fairly consistent pattern after that. It isn't new. I know how difficult it's been. It is disappointing to see some things sort of not getting better. One of the bits of data we don't have in here, and I don't know whether you are able to provide it, is you don't break down the attendance data by district. And if you have that, I think it might be quite interesting to see it, because it may be that some of this difference is because there are some children who are not in school very much and therefore are falling behind, and that brings down the results for everybody else. And actually, from a Fenland perspective, I think it might be important for parents there to be aware that if you send your children to school, the schools in Fenland will do as good a job as everywhere else. If that's not true, I'd be I'd be interested, but I suspect it would be interesting to know how the attendance data matches. So that's my question, really.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on your first point about the differential between early years and then as children progress into phonics, primary, secondary. And I guess one of the things that we have to recognise, obviously, is that the focus of the assessment is quite different. So when you look at the 17 early learning goals, and as I pointed out, the one that we're behind in is self-regulation. I think then when you couple that with the surge in demand for special educational needs, there's obviously something about what is assessed, but also what is preventing those children from progressing. Because if self-regulation is the biggest issue in early years, and those children advance into into their education, if they can't self-regulate, their ability then to perform well when they're under a different, more focused assessment framework is more challenging. And I think that's why, the Best Start in Life will help us to support those children more effectively, because although they are looking good generally for the at the end of reception, the self-regulation is critical, isn't it, if you're going to be able to be in that place to learn. So I think that's why I wanted, in context of this report, to make that link with Inclusion for All. And I think that's why the white paper is so focused on inclusion, because that is the biggest contributory factor to these outcomes. And until we can create an environment where children with additional needs are able to self-regulate and learn, we're going to see that differential. So I think that that's the critical bit in terms of how we will shift our approach moving forward. And definitely, yes, the attendance we will do by district.
Thank you. Noted about the attendance information. That would be really helpful. For Councillor Goldsack, then Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Sarah. This is absolutely fascinating, to be perfectly honest with you. But like many things, I think this is the results. I think what's really, really critical here is what are we going to do with it? What analysis we're going to come up with? What ideas we're going to come up with? What solutions we're going to come up with? In simplistic eyes, and that's all I've got to offer at this stage, things seems to be going pretty well at 2/3 attainment in early years to less than 50% attainment in secondary. I know that's very simplistic, but that's what these statistics tell us. Once we understand the reasons why, and like you say, the white paper might help us with some directional choices that we have to make. But I think we've really got to start working with, and I know we are working with them, but we've really got to get side by side with the educationalists and understand how we address this. I think Lucy made some really good points around Finland. I don't think Finland's full of bad schools. I really don't. I think it's just a uniqueness of the area that's causing specific outcomes. And I think if we can educate the wider area, that's mothers, fathers, carers, families a whole. And I think also, and I would say this, and even though it was my party that brought this through in the first place, I think we've lost community aspects of schools through the trust system. And I think whereas schools used to be at the heart of communities inside and outside the working day, they are now strictly sort of 8:30 to 3:30 and closed down after that, very much so. And I think in small insular communities, like we see in Finland and East Cambs in particular, I think that has a big effect. I think it has a big effect on negating it. So there's lots to do here. Thank you for the report. I think it's really fascinating, and there's an awful lot of information to chew over here. But I must stress that if we can, we want to see some ideas and some outcomes, even workshop it with some of the members in the room here. But I think there's an awful lot that needs to come out of this.
It is a rich picture, but it's got to inform action. Thank you. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Tong.
Good afternoon, Sarah. Thank you very much for the report. Just for clarity for everybody, the white paper has come out, and although it seems like there's a focus on SEND, the focus is actually something called equity. So equity for all. So all of the children will essentially be receiving the same education. So there's no clear distinction between children receiving extra support. All of the children will receive the same level of support, in turn meaning that the focus will be to keep students, whether it's Key Stage 1 all the way up to Key Stage 5, within the classroom. In turn, likely that the support level that they receive is likely to reduce, to then hopefully, according to some political parties, reduce the cost. I think at the moment, the fact that we have an overspend is actually a positive thing. It shows that we are actually trying to support young people with their futures, not cutting. And I think the white paper, to me, suggests that. A couple of notable mentions from some of the answers given today are quite disappointing. It was mentioned from my colleague here, are the academy schools outperforming the schools that are state schools? And the answer was no, they are not. That's a big question for me. Councillor Goldsack mentioned something about academies and the trusts and the lack of community. And also what is evident from the report, from my perspective, is that there's not a clear strategic overview of systems being implemented within the academy system. The academies are just allowed to maintain themselves. So could there be some clarity provided for all of us on the mechanisms used to ensure strategies are implemented within the academies themselves? And what is it that is going to take place to ensure that schools, for example, within Finland, are not falling behind? And before you answer that question, I just wanted to clarify as well that children going from early years into Key Stage 1, they don't actually receive designated support, but when they go into Key Stage 1, they do. So for me, the drop is significant still. I really appreciate the fact that the focus of they need to be able to manage themselves, and they're in more stressful situations, and that's possibly the reason why. But actually, there are members of staff that are salaried to help support those children, but in nursery they are not. There is a drop. There is a problem, and there is something that needs to be done. And unfortunately, I don't think that us here, we actually have enough of a say for there to be improvement. Our education system, from my perspective, is exceptionally poor. And we should be number one, I think, in the world, and we are not.
Thank you. There's quite a lot there. So I was going to start with, I think I would be doing the academies a disservice if I was to suggest that the difference in outcomes is as black and white as it's the academies that are underperforming. There's significant variation across all of our schools. You're right in terms of the accountabilities that the local authority has in intervening in underperforming schools. They are restricted to intervening in local authority maintained schools. However, through our framework, Inclusion for All, we have a status neutral approach because these are Cambridgeshire children, and our shared aspiration is that all those children are enabled to thrive. So on that basis, we've developed a sector reference group that includes the chairs of all the different school networks, including our CEOs of academy trusts. And I regularly attend the CEO meeting of all of those trusts. And I think it would be unfair of me not to point out that some of those academy trusts are very high performing. and that they do actively engage with the local authority despite not having that mandate to do so. And I think what's very clearly articulated within the white paper is that to improve outcomes for children and young people requires a partnership response. And it's very clear within that white paper that the local authority is identified as the convener of partnerships. And I think we're well placed because we already have established relationships and established mechanisms through which we do convene with our system leaders from schools that are diocesan schools, schools that are local authority maintained schools, and schools that are academies. And within the expectation for the Children and Wellbeing Act that I referred to in my introduction, there is an expectation that there will be strengthened governance of multi-academy trusts. At the moment, that is through the regional director, not through the local authority. Although we do have, through the mechanisms that I've just referenced, opportunities where we do raise concerns and we recognise ourselves as an education system where the status of schools within that system is different. But I think it's really critical that we adopt an approach that is one of partnership, where we recognise, and I think that is, as I've said, the aspiration of inclusion for all. So I do believe that there is scope for improvement. I don't think it's quite correct to necessarily say that there is support and maybe I've misunderstood, so forgive me if I have, but if there's support in early years that then it doesn't follow through into primary. I visited one of our primary schools yesterday that has a very high percentage of children with special educational needs, 45%, and they have a Thrive coordinator. The objective of that Thrive coordinator is to do exactly what I talked about earlier, to create that environment, that trauma-informed environment, where those children who have got significant issues, because they talked me through all the children that they have with an education, health and care plan, and the vast majority of them were also open to social care. So that's why it's so critically important that we do have that partnership response and that our schools do invest in one-to-one support, and they do have posts like the one that I've just referenced in terms of that trauma-informed post. So I think you're right to expect more, and I think that's what we are championing through Inclusion for All. That is our shared aspiration across the system. And the the so what in terms of what we're doing about it, we do have a lot of initiatives that I've just alluded to that probably would require more detailed focus, but we can share some of that information following committee that gives practical examples of how we are supporting our schools. And that offer of support is not limited to our local authority maintained schools. A number of our academies buy into our school improvement service also. So I know I haven't probably responded fully to all the points that you've made, but I'm happy to send follow-up information on the specifics in terms of some of the targeted interventions that we are progressing through our school improvement offer.
Thank you, Sarah. Just for clarity, it was the fact that it was mentioned that dysregulation is possibly the reason why children in early years in Key Stage 1 are not quite meeting the national standard. And I was explaining that when they get to Key Stage 1, as you've mentioned, they receive all of that support. However, when they start in nursery, that level of support is not necessarily there. So for me, the fact that there's a dip, especially in the Finlands, is very concerning. What I would like to know is, obviously we have the new white paper coming out and the focus is inclusion for all. I have heard that saying before, as Councillor Nessing has mentioned. What is different? Because from my perspective, it's exactly the same. There is no innovation. There is nothing new. The only thing from the white paper is that it will be equity for all. So all will receive support to meet their need, which is important. I would just like to know, how are we going to ensure that schools, all schools within the county, are engaging with our local authority, and how is it going to be expressed to us as a council and outlined? I'm not expecting, Academy Trust leads to come and be here and tell us. I would like to know how the staff feel, the teachers, the teaching assistants, the staff that are on the ground, the day to day, because the data itself does express lots of different things, but there's clearly something going wrong in Finland. And from the report, we can't actually see what that is.
Thank you. So maybe I think we talked about earlier having some more granular detail by different groups. So at the moment, what we've presented to you today is the sort of headlines across the different key phases. I think what's going to be really helpful is for you to see what that looks like for children on preschool meals, for children with SEN. And that's what we haven't got right now because it's still being validated. So we could share that detail with you to give you a clearer understanding of which cohorts are more impacted than others. So I'm very happy to take that away. But I would say what is different in direct response to your question is that in the redesign that I referred to earlier, it is about providing that swifter and earlier access to some of those partnership services, because as you've referenced yourself, being able to get that additional support makes a difference, because school teachers are trained to teach, and there's barriers that prevent children from being in a place where they can learn. So the skills are not necessarily the same. So we do need to have that specialist support from the right service also. And that is the difference that we're proposing within the education redesign through those locality inclusion partnerships.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Tong, then Councillor Whelan.
Good afternoon. Firstly, can I thank you for this report? Similarly to basically every other councillor, I think it gives a lot of depth and really useful and interesting insights. I am going to ask a question that brings together a few of the threads we had mentioned up to this point, and it also relates to that Key Stage 2 writing outcome, which, as has been noted, is a bit disappointing. And I think this is indicative of a larger national problem, but there is stuff we can do locally about it. I think writing is incredibly important, and I think reading where we're at now does really sadden me, because when children get through school, I don't want them to just be leaving school to get a job and live their life. I want them also to be able to do a lot more for the community. I want them to not just be able to kind of do that bare minimum, get that job where they can just get by. I want them to be able to be actively out there doing what they want to do, kind of self-actualizing. I think that's really essential. And if we don't give children that writing skill, they're not going to really be able to do that. They're not really going to be able to express themselves and push forward with what they want for society as well. So the question was asked about why there are some weaknesses with certain schools and how they're teaching writing, but I kind of want to invert that a little and go to 3.11, which is about what schools are doing well. Because if we're going to fix the problems that some schools are running into, and they obviously are running into, I think it's very important that we look at the exceptions to that. Well, I think it's actually the other way around. It's probably the ones that are doing a little bit worse at the exceptions. But what are the schools that are doing well at? Because this notes that there is data being analysed, there are data trends here, and I'd really like to hear a bit more about these trends, as well as what we're doing to try and implement that knowledge or help other schools implement that knowledge, so that we can have a fairer system where any child is going to leave school with at least semi-confident writing ability that they can later develop and really go on to live a life that is good for them, not just, again, just trying to make ends meet.
Thank you. And I think you're right in terms of there's an issue nationally around writing. If just think about, we don't often write now, do we? Well, the digitalization has led to, I think, a national impact in terms of everybody's ability to write. We have an over-reliance on laptops, for instance. But in terms to give you some practical examples of some of the interventions, because I think that's what people are asking for. So we have moderation training to support accurate assessment throughout Key Stage 2. We're working with schools and clusters to undertake moderation exercises in schools and to identify next steps for pupils. We've got English and maths advisors have targeted schools and provided bespoke work, including undertaking diagnostic assessments to support teachers identify gaps and misconceptions for lower attaining pupils who are not making good progress. We have maths advisors that have written a set of diagnostic materials for each group that schools can purchase and have support. We've written a new writing scheme. We have English and maths advisors have run several projects targeting disadvantaged pupils. They then track these pupils and the data for these and share them across different schools so that we can build capacity. We have a reading fluency project for targeting schools, and we've seen improvement in the data. We have phonics projects for targeted schools. Phonics and early reading pre-Ofsted audits have continued. So we look at what's emerging in terms of themes and trends within the Ofsted framework, and then we have targeted support in response to those areas of underperformance. We've got key training and messaging around the Year 4 times table check. English advisors have written a scheme of work for writing last summer for schools to purchase and provided some to targeted schools free of charge. This is showing impact in pupils' writing, but it's obviously going to take time to fully embed. So there's a whole list of targeted projects that not that we haven't gone into detail within the report, but I think from what I'm hearing, it would be useful to share some of those, but also I think that more granular analysis that we talked about earlier.
Am I able to come back on that quickly?
Yes, quickly.
Yes, so that was really, really interesting information. Personally, if I'm able to ask, I would love to have a report that goes into that more in depth because, well, writing is so important to both me and I think generally to people across Cambridgeshire. It's so important to empower children, and we really can aim higher, and I think we should be aiming higher to make sure all children can write very, very confidently so they can go out and do the things they want to do and try and shape society in the way they want it to be shaped. So it's really good we're doing that, but I would love a little bit more depth and perhaps to return to this to see how those interventions end up going.
Thank you. I think, the message is loud and clear that this is a rich seam of information, but we sort of want a bit more to see what the impact is, and so we can look how to follow it up. I've got Councillor Whelan, then Councillor Damry-Holman, and then hopefully we can draw it to a conclusion.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent report, Sarah. Thank you for that. Just on the Key Stage 4 and above, are there any steps being taken to strengthen vocational and technical pathways? Because obviously not all pupils are want to go down the academic route. So I'd be interested to know on what steps are being taken to encourage more vocational and technical pathways going forward. Thanks.
Yeah, there's obviously, as I've said, all of our secondaries are academies, but there's a number of different vocational pathways that are being pursued, and I guess it's always that balance, isn't it? Because the way Attainment 8 works is that those subjects are given different weightings, and obviously then schools are judged around the performance.
Sarah, just hold on.
Your microphone looks like it's working, but it actually isn't.
So sorry about that. Yes, I was just saying that there are obviously all of our secondaries are academies. The way Attainment 8 works is that each of those 8 subjects have different weightings, and obviously the English Maths, for instance, has double weighted. So in their considerations around vocational pathways, knowing that schools are obviously judged by their Attainment 8 outcomes, that does influence the way that those pathways are determined. But absolutely, it has to work so that some pupils are just not naturally going to be high performing and do have to have an alternative curriculum. So yes, again, that's something that we could provide further detail on when we share some additional information following the meeting.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Damery-Homan.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chair, and I'll try and be quick. Just so I've discussing the lower attainment of writing has actually made me reflect on something that I come across children in school struggling with, and that I struggle with as a child myself. So I understand that it's quite common practice at primary school level to insist that children write with cursive writing. I'd be very interested to know if we have any sort of information of the impact of cursive writing. I know for myself, I really struggled as a child in primary school, being forced to write that way. I got to secondary school, completely changed the way I write. And I see this particularly when I'm working with year sevens, handwriting that's illegible. I wonder if that's something that we could look into, and particularly in our local authority maintained schools, could we be looking to encourage them to support children to write in a way that is comfortable to them, rather than a way that is prescribed to them? Thank you.
Yes, I'll follow that one up. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything. No, I think currently our focus is obviously in terms of improving writing overall. But absolutely, I can come back with further detail on that.
I'd be very interested to pursue further, because I think it could, for a certain cohort of students, really support them in their writing, but then just more broadly their well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that's a really important point. Colleagues, I think, and that's been a really interesting set of questions and comments and insights. Thank you very much, Sarah, for the report. It's really detailed and incredibly helpful, and the desire for more information rather than less is kind of is a helpful thing, and I'm very glad that you're going to follow up with the further information. It will be most gratefully received. We are really just noting this report, having scrutinised it, and I believe we have done that very well. So thank you very much, Sarah, for the report. The next item, we want to do justice to it, but we do need to take a break. So I will say we will adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes, a quick 10 minutes if possible, and then we can come back and deal properly with the virtual school annual report. Thank you. We need to start again, Tamar. Yeah. Right, thank you very much. Let's crack on and onto the Virtual School Annual Report. This is a really important opportunity as an annual report. This gives us an incredible insight into the work of the virtual school, which is, I have to say, doing absolutely brilliant things. And Claire, thank you in advance for this excellent report, but please, would you like to introduce it?
Yes, thank you. So the report has been brought to committee at the request of elected members following the report being shared at Spokes. There are no key decisions required. The committee are asked to note and note the content of the virtual school report and the progress made across the cohorts of children, support the virtual school's priorities in reducing days of lost learning, improving attendance, closing attainment gaps and strengthening the offer for our wider cohorts, including kinship care. As to continue to support the continued partnership working with earlier settings, schools, colleges, multi-academy trusts and social care to sustain improvements in the personal education plans for children in care, the attendance, exclusions and post-16 pathways. The annual report is a statutory requirement. It provides an evaluative account of the work of the virtual school from September 24 to August 25. It covers the 4 cohorts of children that the virtual school has responsibility for, which is children in care, children previously in care, children with a social worker, and children in kinship care. Please be aware that the data contained within the report is internal data. Validated data, which we will be able to compare national and statistical neighbours, will start to be released later this month. In terms of the key messages, there's a 3-year trend in improving outcomes for our children in care, with a particular note to our Key Stage 2 outcomes, which are within 10% of all children nationally. There have been no permanent exclusions, and there is strong partnership working between the virtual school and partners, as evidenced through the survey and quotes within the report. This has led to improvements in the quality of PEPs, particularly at post-16, increase the coverage of trauma-informed work through working with our partners in early years and fostering an adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It presents a really rich picture. Comments, questions? Councillor Demery-Holman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. I have to say it was a delight to read. Just wonderful work going on. I think there's lots I could say. I'm just always supportive of trauma-informed approaches. Question for you. Appendix 10 refers to the UASC graph and mortar experience. Are you providing that experience for other students of the virtual school? And if not, I'd be more than happy to discuss how we can collaborate on that.
So last year, we offered the experience to our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And that was with some specific focuses. That was in recognition that opportunities during the summer holidays, a lot of our unaccompanied asylum seeking children are in supported accommodation, maybe not in foster care, where they're not within that sort of family environment. And this was to support in terms of giving them positive activity. It also was about helping them to understand the role of the virtual school and getting some feedback from them to support our work with them. And about the development of English, because they were all mixing together. So it was a really positive experience. We were able to achieve some external funding to enable specifically for us to work with that group of children to access those opportunities. It's been really positive. We have repeated it. It has just taken place again for one day during the February half term. We do have some additional funding that we've been able to secure, which we are targeting around our Year 6 children. So they will have an opportunity during the Easter holidays to go to Grafham Water. And we've managed to get that through a grant through Public Health, which is about improving water safety for our children. So they will be improving those skills, but alongside that, obviously, they'll be developing their connection to the virtual school. And again, it will be an opportunity for us to get their views and sort of support their sense of belonging.
Thank you. Other comments and questions, please?
Just because there aren't any comments, I think it's probably a result of the fact that it's such a good report, and I think everybody's probably just really enjoyed reading it. To be honest, I think there's some absolutely brilliant work that you're doing, and you know, hats off to you, because I think you know you're leading on all of this, and you're doing a fantastic job. So thank you.
I mean, I would just say that obviously I'm supported by a excellent team. It absolutely is a collaboration of a team that are just very committed and hardworking.
Thank you. That's absolutely appreciated. Councillor Tong.
I'll simply add a very similar sentiment. I think this report is really good. I think it provides such a good insight into the work that's going on, which is fantastic. And it's great that we're putting so much effort into making education as accessible as possible.
So, question from me. What is the best possible support that we can give you?
I think you know, the opportunity to come here today is really great, because I think, you know, the most important thing is that our children are visible and that they're understood. We are putting on some training. It's on the training plan for elected members, which is on our trauma-informed training that we do take out to schools and we offer to our county council officers. So I think that's planned for June time. So we would really welcome your attendance on that training to help you understand a little bit more about some of the needs of our children, experiences that they might have had, and how that then may impact on them in education. I guess that, you know, our ask from you is that you, which I know you always will be, that you're always advocating for our children, that you're always considering, if, you know, you find out about opportunities and things that may be able to, you know, you may be able to come back to us, that you're, you know, you're helping people to understand about the work, our work. And that, you know, we're always really keen to sort of connect and collaborate if anybody is aware of any external opportunities and things like that we can utilise to support our children.
Thank you. I think, you know, we all need to reflect on that. And in terms of the training opportunity, is that open to all members?
Yes, I believe it will be. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we must make a special note to try to attend and tell our colleagues to do that as well. And please do keep an open channel and do raise any issues that you feel that members generally can help with, because we are really keen to support you. Any other comments? Councillor Stewart.
It would just be great if we could have the actual date, because I would like to attend. I probably already had the training, but I would like to attend. So if I have the date in advance, then I can share that with my head of school just to let her know. She won't be happy if I don't turn up.
I'll make sure that's circulated. I think it is on the forward plan, but I will make sure it's circulated.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? Well, with gratitude, thank you very much indeed. We don't have to, as you mentioned, we don't have to we do have a vote on this. In fact, we and co-opted members are eligible to vote, and it is to note the content and to support the virtual schools priorities, to support the continued partnership work with schools. Those in favour, please raise your hand.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, unanimous. So thank you very much. We'll move on to thank you very much, Claire. We'll move on to the last public item, or penultimate public item, which is the Children's Statutory Complaints Policy. Liz, I believe you're going to present this.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. So I'm here to present the Children's Statutory Complaints Policy. obviously, as the executive summary in your cover report says, that complaints in relation to the care and support provided by Cambridgeshire County Council to children are governed by a specific set of rules, and it talks about where those kind of come from. And this is then the proposal for the policy in relation to statutory complaints. I would like to say the report does make clear this is only about those that come in the auspices of statutory complaints. It does talk about in the cover report and in the policy itself that corporate complaints, and I think complaints in relation to SEND and statutory assessment, which have been things this committee have been very interested in, those are dealt with under a different kind of set of aligned procedures. So just being kind of clear with that in terms of the policies. I'd also like to mention, you will have noticed that section 4.1 of the cover report says that there aren't any alternative options that have been considered. And this is because I hope that the report does make clear that we are required to have a policy that is in respect of the regulations and rules and the statutory guidance. So there isn't a great deal of manoeuvrability. Also to assure you that obviously these procedures there were procedures in place in relation to the dealing with statutory complaints for children's. This is around as a result of the Council's revised feedback policy, which is mentioned in the policy and report, being passed at the end of last year, that to actually have a specific policy for statutory complaints would mean that we were compliant then with those wider regulations. I think again, just to to make the assurance to committee, and I know when I presented previously the annual report on complaints, this is around the formal process. This is to make sure that people know what they can expect if they wish to raise a concern about how the service has been delivered to them, or anything else in relation to their contact as a young person or a family. However, we do set a huge amount of store by behaving in a relational way when people want to talk to us about things that aren't working well for them. So we would always seek to have, where appropriate, those informal kind of resolutions, those relational conversations with people. But it is important that those that we work with, those that we deliver services to, and those that we serve know that what they can expect from us if they wish to make that complaint kind of formal and to go through the process. So in terms of, I think there are some quite simple things kind of laid out about why we have got this policy, including how it links to existing other policies and guidance within the local authority. So the request today obviously is to ask this committee to agree the policy and to allow us to formalise that fully. Obviously, there are things in the implications section, in section 6, and again, I'm happy to take kind of any questions, but again, to provide assurance that those considerations have been made in relation to finance, legal, and equality and diversity implications.
Thank you very much. It may be the last item on the agenda, but is by no means the least. It's very important to get this right. So, do members have questions or comments, please? Councillor Gold.
I think, I mean, there's been 2 or 3 mentions today of future things that we've got to take care of, just to make, the officers will make sure that they're on there, and we should see them thereafter. But it's very key that we pick up on those. Certainly after today, I think there's been a lot of good stuff. Thank you.
And again, there were a lot of comments after the annual report about complaints. So sort of a lot of comments for follow on from that. So I think the whole area of complaints is really very fundamental and important. Councillor Damry-Hellman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at paragraph 5, what can be claimed about. Obviously, this is quite a broad description. Is there anywhere, obviously not within this document, but perhaps within, obviously this is statutory complaint, so are you able to point us to the statutes that would define the full range of things that can be complained about under this policy. Thank you.
So in terms of the front of the page talks about obviously the regulations within the kind of Children's Act and about how those are applied. I appreciate the comment around within the policy about what can be complained about. I would suggest that it is really important that it talks about the things that are available, and actually there's quite a list of things kind of in there. So I suppose when I look at that, I would see that that covers quite a significant range of things in terms of how we have delivered services. I'm happy if there's any specific question that you have around what else that would look like. I mean, it is aligned to the council's feedback policy, but I suppose we have been deliberately broad in enabling people to say, if you are unhappy from a statutory, in terms of statutory services delivery, then we can consider that. What's probably more relevant and pertinent are the exemptions, because I think that dovetails in, allows you to sort of think, if you thought about things that maybe are brought to you or you're aware of in terms of for the constituents that you serve, that it would allow you perhaps to have a sort of an understanding. I'm happy to answer any specific question though outside.
No, I think that I accept what you're saying there, and I don't think I have any specific questions at this time. I'm sure if I do, I'm sure you'd be happy for us to write to you. But yeah, fully appreciate what you're saying there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So, Liz, what is your view about the main challenge for this policy when it hits reality and we get complaints that we have to use this? I mean, as I outlined, we already work to the procedures piece that we work to already mimics the regulations and the requirements on us. I think that what is a significant challenge for us generally is the number of kind of complaints that we kind of work with across, and to make sure that we kind of respond in the way that that we do. So my ask is really to say that we would appreciate that kind of sort of agreement and validation of this as a policy for the local authority. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? So we've been asked to vote on this, and co-opted members are eligible to vote. So we're asked to agree the statutory complaints policy within Appendix 1. Those in favour, please raise your hand now. Thank you.
That's unanimous.
Unanimous again. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. So item 11 is the committee agenda, training and appointments plan. Are there any further updates?
None that
No.
I'm aware of, no.
Or on the training plan? We've had a couple of comments about training and so on, so we'll have to perhaps review that and get back to members. But are there any other points to note that you'd like to make? No? Any other comments from members? Are you happy with that? Councillor Edge.
Can I just come back? I mean, I think we need officers to chat, but I do feel I remember something on the virtual school training that we were all going to be invited to, and it was going to be done prior to one of our committee meetings, if I'm remembering correctly. It would be good to know that, because I think it may have been moved and it may need to be rescheduled, if I'm remembering correctly.
Thank you. Martin is going to take that away as an action to clarify. Thank you very much indeed. So members will note the governor's appointments for August to December 2025 were attached to the agenda at Appendix 2. And we were asked to note that the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families exercises his delegated authority in consultation with the committee spokes to appoint Councillor Rory Clark to the Cambridgeshire Culture Board. So thanks to Rory for taking this on, and it will be noted. So the next item is the final item. My briefing says on this morning's agenda, but you know what time, but you know what it is a confidential report. It's proposed to be discussed in private session. So we're being asked to resolve that the press and public should be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the agenda contains, or this item contains, exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information relates to financial or business affairs of a particular person, including the authority holding the information. Are there any objections to going into private session? Thank you. I take that as agreed unanimously. Thank you to those members of the press and public who've watched today's meeting. The live stream will stop shortly and the committee will adjourn for a short comfort break before moving into confidential session. Thank you. Yeah, we will just await confirmation that the live stream is off, and then I propose that we actually continue, but it might just be a couple of minutes.